Why did Shakespeare write in pen? Because pencils confused him. It's like to be or not to be. Hi, welcome to Paulina's Pages. My name is Paulina and today is the Read and Discuss with Me segment. Today is The Handmaid's Tale. As you can see, I'm displaying the list of contents that will be included in this video right now. Alright, let's begin. The Handmaid's Tale, written by Margaret Atwood, was published in 1985. Around that time, conservative groups attacked the progress made by second-wave feminists, and this book thinks about what would have happened if they had won, and women's rights progress had been eliminated. Atwood used history as her inspiration, 17th century Puritan theocracy in America, and what the political climate was like in the early 1980s. She also looks at the appointment of Ronald Reagan and the embrace of Christian conservatism. So these are the main historical points I'm going to focus on. From last week's video, I learned that unless you're doing your papers and really need the historical content, tend to skip to the themes and symbolical bits. So I will just shortly focus on these points above mentioned in regard to history. Second-wave feminism began in the US in the 1960s and lasted roughly 2 decades. The second-wave slogan was "the personal is the political," and the movement thought of women's cultural and political struggles and inequalities as linked, and pushed for women to understand how personal lives are affected by the patriarchy. The movement later evolved over time, but it was criticized for not being inclusive of black women, and only of being focused on mainly the white women. The basic beliefs of Puritanism, shorted down, is the belief in the judgmental God. Good versus evil, salvation versus damnation, all was predetermined by him. Good can only be accomplished through work and self-discipline. In the 17th century, the Puritans moved from England to the USA and established a stronghold there which lasted into the 19th century. During the 1980s, in the USA, conservative politics and Reaganomics were the dominant. Reaganomics refers to the politics imposed by Ronald Reagan. The 4 main ideas of Reaganomics were, and I quote from Wikipedia, to reduce the growth of government spending, reduce the federal income tax and capital gains tax, reduce government regulation, and tighten the money supply in order to reduce inflation. Phew! Now let's talk a little about the author herself. Hopefully you found that historical section as helpful as I did. History is not my strongest subject, so these videos help me too. Margaret Atwood was born in 1939 in Ottawa, Canada. Her works are internationally known. There's The Handmaid's Tale, The Testaments, Cat's Eye. She grew up in Quebec and loved writing from an early age. She graduated from Victoria College at the University of Toronto in 1961. Brief but complete summary with spoilers. If you have not read the book, please skip through this part. The Handmaid's Tale is a first-person narration from Offred, a handmaid, hence the name. The story takes place in the Republic of Gilead, a Christian theocracy. It is highly infertile and children are extremely wanted, though there's these women, the wives, who are infertile and they are married to rich men, the commander, hiring other women to have children for. Kind of like surrogate motherhood, except for the handmaids don't really have a choice. Except if the women being hired don't help, they'll be deemed unwomen, basically sentenced to a life even worse than what they have right now. And the one they have right now is terrible. These fertile handmaidens are being ordered to have sex. If they do have a baby, it gets taken away and the handmaids move on to the next commander. And if they can't have a baby, the problem is of course them. Of course it can't be the men who run the society, who can't possibly have reproductive problems and be sterile. So Offred has a huge problem, other than her terrible life of course. It's that the commander appears to be sterile. Her husband and child have been taken away from her, her best friend disappeared. She really needs this baby before she's sent to clean up toxic waste. Her obstetrician offers to help her conceive since they'll never know the difference, and he claims to have helped other women. He's very handsy and she's of course worried of people coming in, so she declines. Then time passes, still no baby, and then one day the commander summons her into his office. What do you think is going to happen? No, he doesn't rape her. He's done it many times before, even though technically she has consented, but then again she didn't have another choice, she was forced into it. He gets her to play Scrabble. Yes, that's right, Scrabble. I'm currently displaying a picture on the board in case you do not know what Scrabble is. It's basically a game where you have to try to make words. So she's not supposed to be reading and writing because she's a woman. They keep meeting. he summons her into his office. She starts to feel more connected to him. Stockholm syndrome, I wonder. Then the commander's wife tells her that Offred should sleep with their gardener slash chauffeur Nick, and Offred agrees. They sleep together more than once. They both crave human touch. Then the commander gives her some very old lingerie and takes her to a brothel for a fun night out, because you know, that's what women want to do. There she meets her disappeared best friend Moira, who has seemingly given up on the fight and is satisfied with the life that she's living right now. While all of this had been going on, Offred had become a part of the resistance movement Mayday. Recently, her partner, who introduced her, had disappeared. She killed herself. Then a van comes in the middle of the night and Nick whispers to her that it's Mayday, it's alright, and Offred gets in, and Offred goes off into the unknown. Phew, so that's your main idea. Now let's talk about the themes and symbols that are explored in this book. I chose these as I thought they were the most important to mention. So the themes include theocracy, faith, fertility, mortality, life, love, secrecy, identity. Theocracy is when the government and the church are together. In regard to faith, there are many biblical allusions throughout the novel, which I find really interesting, and I'll talk about that later. Fertility is status and power. This theme is explored a lot, but the question is status and power for whom? Okay, so love here is linked a lot with life. There's that desperation for human contact in life. Also the desire to keep your life and not get killed, because you can't sleep with a handmaid because that's a violation, and the handmaiden can sleep with anyone else other than the commander. It also links into secrecy, because there is no way that you can love and touch someone unless it's in secret. I just realized how dead inside I sound. I'm sorry, I'll get more energetic. This book has just made me really thoughtful, and yeah, it's honestly a powerful book, but I'll get to that in my review. Okay, so symbols, I was honestly blown away by these. I would have probably given this book less stars if it weren't for these, but again, let's talk about that later. Red, the veils, the shops and the pictures, the Latin joke, nolitete vestardes carburantorum. I hope that I pronounced that last word correctly. It's a joke, so it's not actually an actual Latin phrase. Scrabble, the sharp weapons like glass, knife, and his role as Offred's previous husband, like previous life. So much more. I'm so sorry to brush over these symbols a little, but there's some other comments that I want to make, and I want to be as concise and well developed and to the point as can humanly be possible, because watching videos and studying for school, I realized just how much every minute means in a video, so let's not add things where they shouldn't be. So these symbols are ubiquitous throughout the book, and they link in a lot with the themes I mentioned before. The shops and pictures, for example. In the story, all the signs were replaced with pictures. And this links into the language idea. Knowledge is something sacred, allowed only to men, and why would women need it if they're just the means to reproduction is the logic behind it. Loss of names and the identity is also representative of the anti-feminist movement and made to show how women are being oppressed. A red that symbolizes menstruation, fertility, childbirth. It's also significant that the handmaids wear red. It's a constant reminder of who they are and what their role in society is. The sharp objects were, and there were a lot of those, were symbols of objects that you could commit suicide in, and that linked to death. Suicide wasn't something that was allowed. In Offred's room, they removed the chandelier because the previous Offred had hanged herself from it. I think the best way to put it is your death was not your own either, because your life was not your own. You were the human population's future as the handmaid. You were the one who had to give birth and try to increase the population because it was decreasing so much already. Okay, now there's some other key points that I want to mention, and they're not in any particular order. I just found them interesting, and I thought they were a great detail to add what was mentioned before and to talk a little more about the themes and everything else. Offred, the name, means of Fred. I don't know if you got it. It's kind of like de Paul in French, like of like Paul, belonging to Paul, but it also sounds similar to offered, and the handmaids were offered to God and to the commanders, the male representatives. It also sounds a lot like of red, wearing red, and again the handmaids are wearing red. Second, Atwood talks a lot about female hierarchy in the book. So I'm displaying a picture right now. There's the wives, the marses, the handmaids, the aunts. It's a whole system, but even women in positions of high power suffer from a patriarchal society. For example, Serena Joy, the commander's wife, she used to be an actress. She used to be famous. She was on TV a lot, but now she's essentially been reduced to this infertile woman, rich woman who depends on her husband to survive. After birth and during pregnancy, handmaids are treated with more respect, but they essentially still have no rights. How quickly this dictatorship can appear. The book talks about how fast the sequence of events happened, how one moment Offred had a job, had money, she was an independent woman with a family, and the next moment she was totally dependent on her husband and they were trying to escape her family and landed into this job, which is essentially forced prostitution. The fourth point is how name is connected with identity and how when you strip people of such, you just dehumanize them. Handmaids don't have names and they don't have memories. They basically can't remember their past lives. Those come back in flashes. Their sole purpose is literally to reproduce. By dehumanizing them, people are stepping away from the fact that they're women and are thinking them more of empty wombs that need to be filled in order to ensure the survival of human race. Number 5, the language and Scrabble. So the Scrabble, when Offred relishes the feeling of using words, of reading words, of writing words, resistance she feels when playing this game, the forbidden secrecy between her going to the commander's office, but somehow it's more sensual and more deep than if they would have had sex. It's honestly the secrecy, the way that she gives herself into the words. The terms in this world are simplified: unwoman, unbaby, all of these terms made to reduce the education that women get. So these points were an important and interesting addition that I wanted to add, and I know I glazed over the themes and symbols a little. But I honestly feel that this book is really beneficial to read to everyone, and I will be uploading a full list of quotes that I liked in the description box below, so check them out at the end of the video. Hopefully they'll help you understand what has been said in this video. And let's move on to the review. Okay, so I think it's clear from the video that I find this book worth dedicating so much time to. I was fully absorbed in the story from the first page to the last. It terrified me and gave me literal chill. The idea, the symbolism, the world. What lacked for me though were the characters. I felt like Aswood glossed over the fact that men get hurt by the patriarchy as well. She could have developed Nick and the commander's characters a little more, and I feel like that would have made the book even more perfect in my eyes. I also did not really like the narrator, and I can't understand why. Narration and story were fantastic, and she was a great character, so I can't really understand why my feelings towards her are the way they are. Maybe I don't like some of her actions, even though they are of course justifiable, and there's no way that I can judge her because she is just trying to survive in the terrible world that she lives in. The curious thing about this book for me was that it's one of history's many what ifs. What if the conservative movement had stopped the progress of women's rights? What if this could happen any day? And you looked at the story and you could see how it was so sudden, the change, when women just lost their access to everything. And this is possible right now in the digital age where everyone has their data, and all it requires is for someone radical to see essentially if a woman has an F or an M next to her name and just cut people off completely. Everyone. And what would we do in a world where we as women don't have access to anything to ensure that we resist against this, and how many men would rise to support us? I think Luke was a great example of this, and I'm actually sad as well that his character didn't get explored much, because I got the feeling towards the end that he didn't really mind what happened to Offred. He thought it was, I don't know what he thought. He thought it was cool that she was dependent on him, I guess. Maybe it made him feel more manly, but to me, that was the moment where I knew I didn't like Luke at all, but I had to understand his character more, and I would have loved to read more of his character, because I think it was a very human reaction. It was dishonorable of him to not even try to do anything for his wife, who basically now depends on him being a loyal and respectful husband. Plot, execution, fantastic. The only thing that lacked for me was the ending a little. I felt it was a bit rushed, but nevertheless, 5 stars. Honestly, I would recommend this book anytime to anyone. I think it's an interesting idea to explore, and the dystopian world is honestly amazing. This is one of the best books I've read this entire year. So yeah, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you on Saturday, where I'll talk more about my November TPR. Bye.